Good evening, everybody. It is Friday night. It is 8 p.m. This is the Wrestling Channel, and you are watching the Bagpipe Report. We got a great show today. We're going to review last weekend's pay-per-view, WWE Unforgiven. We're going to have Brian Alvarez here from the Figure 4 newsletter to talk about that show, all the week's news. Also, we have live on the phone from Germany, one of the top talents touring the area right now, touring the world, in fact. This guy is all over the place. You'll know him as the notorious backstage rumor monger from WWE, or you'll know him as the red shirt security guard from NWA TNA. Just Joe E. Legend is going to be right here on the show today on the Bagpipe Report. Good evening, everybody, and indeed welcome to the Bagpipe Report. I am back, and I'm Blake Norton, and this is the Wrestling Channel. First up, Colt Cabana came into town last week. He wrestled at Hot Wired. He wrestled a very, very good match, a very entertaining match with the Wonder Kid, the wonderful Johnny Storm, with his Wonderwall finisher. Really good match. Johnny Storm still isn't wrestling for FWA right now. There's still talk of him getting back into the promotion because he lost to Lose a Leafs Town match a while back to James Ty. Meanwhile, Colt Cabana is going to stick around. He's going to be wrestling in England for the next 2 months. Should be with All Star Wrestling, Brian Dixon's group, so keep your eye out for him. And hopefully we'll get him in here in the studio to talk about Ring of Honor and other things down the road. Now, moving right on to WWE news, we've got Brian Alvarez here from the Figure 4 weekly newsletter. How are you doing this week, Brian?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good stuff. Now, the most interesting thing to me the last week, it hasn't been all that big a week for news, but there's been a lot of talk about Paul Heyman, who is he's kind of like the mysterious sphinx of WWE. You never know where he is, you never know what he's a part of, and there's talk of him being back involved in writing. What team is it for, and what is he doing right now?
I think that what he's doing is he's giving them a bunch of ideas, and whether they use them or not is totally up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's more a consultant role. I don't think he's actually going to be writing any of the shows or anything like that, and I think he's actually got very little power.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just kind of like anybody on the writing team. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're the head writer or who you are. Everything still has to go through Stephanie, and it still has to go through Vince. So
Right.
There's very little actual creativity to being a part of the creative team. So I don't expect like the whole company to turn around or anything like that with Paul Heyman on the crew. It's just, he'll give them some ideas, and they probably won't even use half of them.
Right. And is he involved now in the Raw crew or the SmackDown crew?
I think he's going to both shows, actually.
Really? That's interesting. Now, moving right along, Dr. Death's Steve Williams had surgery last week. He had throat cancer, and he had his voice box removed. What have you heard on the prognosis of, maybe some newer fans won't be aware from as much, but he was in WWE in the later years. He was in WCW a bit as well, but his heyday was really back in the mid-90s, very, very popular in Japan as well. What's the story with him right now?
I just know that he's like one of the toughest guys that I've ever heard of in my entire life. I mean, he was doing cancer therapy. Actually, nobody knew he had cancer because he kept it under wraps.
Mm-hmm.
And then as he was undergoing therapy, he actually went to Japan and wrestled. And I think that the chances of him ever getting in the ring again are very slim, and it's going to be a real tough battle for him. But it is nice that WWE.com actually is doing updates on their site with how he's doing, which kind of, it's a great thing, but it sort of surprises me given some of the other guys that have died or are very sick that they've made no mention of whatsoever. So,
but do you think it could be a connection because it's widely known that Jim Ross is a very big fan of his and used to endorse him very strongly when he was working for WWE?
Yeah, it could be, but then again, it's also like, Earthquake is battling cancer right now as well, and
Right.
he had a huge run there, and I don't think they've made any mention of him whatsoever.
Yeah.
What can you do?
Now, we had the return last week of the Big Show. I'm starting to think of this as the Big Show exception because the last few years, WWE, and we had Gangrel on the air last week making some really interesting conversation about how they're very, very picky about the guys' weight. You know, guys like him and guys like Vader and so many other guys that have Blue Meanie, of course, is an example. They got really down on and ultimately let go twice because of his weight. The Big Show seems to defy every single one of these rules. It seems that the more he eats, the higher they actually push him upon every return from injury. What's his status right now physically and storyline-wise? What are they doing with him?
I think, well, WWE is very, they have a big thing about weight, but I think they also have a thing about the extreme ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like, a guy like Gangrel or somebody like that.
Is just overweight.
Yeah, that's a guy who could be a normal-sized guy, but if he puts on too much weight, then he looks just like a fat guy. Whereas Big Show, to us on TV, he probably just does look like a fat guy, but he's so huge that when Vince is backstage and he sees his 500-pound giant man, he's just blown away.
Yeah.
And of course they're going to say, you could lose a little bit of weight and that sort of thing. But you can also look at a guy like Rikishi where he's way too fat, but that was part of his gimmick.
Yeah.
And you didn't fire him until, he got lazy and whatever. But I think Big Show, it's part of his gimmick to be huge. And he loses weight every now and then to make him happy, but then he just eats it right back. So he's just a big dude.
I actually find it interesting is that something a lot of fans haven't picked up on, and not to be critical or anything, but certainly, like, you've been backstage a lot, and it is funny how when you run into, like, for instance, guys like Lex Luger or The Godfather, who are guys where a lot of fans often say, why are they being pushed this much? When you're backstage and you realize how physically impressive they really are, which never comes across on camera for the bigger guys, I think that might explain a little bit of why these guys get a push, because when you're booking and when you're in the back and you're looking at these people in real life, you really do get a different impression than you do on television, don't you?
Well, I guarantee that's it, because I remember I was backstage at a show and Albert walked by. And I took one look at Albert and I was like, oh my God, this guy, I'd push him to the moon. And I had to slap myself to realize, this is Albert. And I think the deal is that, like, they're so close to the wrestlers and they're always backstage and they're never sitting in a living room with normal fans or just only watching it on TV, because when you watch it on TV, these guys are big. They're not really that big. And I think their opinion of these guys is totally skewed from watching them backstage and how big they are. And it's just, I can see Vince salivating over these guys daily. Like, oh man, Big Show's going to make me $1 billion. Not knowing that if you watch Big Show on television, he's just a big fat guy that chokeslams people.
We're going to move on that note right on to TNA. It is just a general question. I picked up this quote from Dixie Carter in the Nashville City paper. I just thought this was the funniest quote. She said, viewers have been trained to only order wrestling pay-per-views once a month. And now TNA, for over 2 years, their main show, was a pay-per-view every single week. And now the week that it ends, she says, oh, well, viewers have been trained to order it every month, so that's why we're going there. Do you think that on the heels of that this change is going to work positively for them in terms of buys, that they're going to be able to get more buys at the end of a month than they would have for 4 separate pay-per-views? And of course, it's a lot more cost-effective, like they learned with the In Your House series, to do a bigger show than to do smaller shows and shorter shows.
Well, to me, the deal is it doesn't even matter if they get more buys. I mean, they can get the same number of buys for the monthly shows they were getting for the weekly shows, and they're still going to come out ahead because, let's say that they're doing 10,000 buys and losing $100,000 on a show. Okay, if they lose $100,000 once a month, that is so much better than losing $400,000 a month.
Yeah.
So, there is a chance that they will bump buys up enough going once a month that they'll actually break even on pay-per-views and maybe make a little money. But at the very least, they're going to go from losing every single week to only losing once a week. And when you're being, kept alive by a company that is pumping money into you, hoping that there will be something in the future, I mean, to go from losing $400,000 a week to losing $100,000 a week is a major, major step. Because theoretically, they'll keep you alive 4 times longer.
How far away are we now, or really is it within grasp for them to be self-sustained? Because right now, the impression I have is that if any day Panda pulls the plug, was not meant to sound that funny, that they're out of business because they need that financial backing. Are they on the road to self-sufficiency?
I don't know if they'll ever be self-sufficient, because it's so, I think it's almost pretty much impossible to be self-sufficient as a national American organization these days. You have to be backed by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And with Vince, they're backed by 40 years, and the fact that they did an IPO when they were on top of the world and have $300 million in cash on hand. That's why they're self-sufficient.
That'll do it.
When you're starting from nothing to get to the point that Vince is at, it would take generations, I think.
Yeah.
So they've got to have somebody behind them really at all times. And as long as they're not losing a lot of money and making maybe even a little bit of money, they should be totally fine. Mm-hmm. And I think that they are. But the thing is, like, they're getting close to where they probably could make a little money, but then they've got these crazy ideas about running house shows, like running a house show on a Monday night.
Yeah.
Okay, WWE isn't even running house shows on Monday nights because they have to cancel them half the time because nobody goes.
Because they're watching.
So if WWE is canceling house shows on a Monday night, why TNA thinks that they can run a house show on Monday night is totally beyond me.
Mm-hmm. Do you think they've succeeded at all in creating a niche audience, like a TNA audience that doesn't watch WWE?
I think they've done a good job of creating some sort of audience. I don't know what it is, but I do know that I have actually met human beings that only watch TNA.
Really?
So, I guess not a lot of them, but they're out there.
Okay, we'll be right back after the break with our review of WWE Unforgiven. Welcome back to the Bagpipe Report. On the line we have from the Figure 4 weekly newsletter, Brian Alvarez. You can check it out at WrestlingObserver.com and find out all the information for ordering right there. We're going to take a look back now at this past Sunday. WWE had the Unforgiven pay-per-view. It was a Raw Brand pay-per-view, I should say. The month previous, they had SummerSlam, which is both Raw and SmackDown. This past one was Raw only, and it was headlined by Randy Orton going in as champion versus Triple H for the Heavyweight Championship. Now, Brian, I saw the show. We'll get into the matches and all that, but overall impression I got is that it wasn't a bad show. Obviously, WWE is a lot of good talent, but creatively, it lacked a lot of direction. Of course, there's a couple of small things which I found very weird that they did. But overall, I just found that creatively, it lacked direction, and because of that, it wasn't exciting to go into, and it wasn't exciting coming out of it. We were talking about last week that they'd maybe have to have a big angle coming out, and that just didn't seem to happen. How was the show for you?
Well, like you said, the booking going into it was atrocious, and the crowd didn't care about anything except, I guess, the opener. And I did not enjoy it. I mean, it was like maybe a little less, okay maybe, but I don't know. It did nothing for me.
Well, let's kick it off from the top. Chris Benoit and William Regal. Of course, those two guys faced off in that amazing match from Pillman 2000 that's on the new Chris Benoit DVD. They took on Ric Flair and Batista. I thought it was a good old school match, but wasn't really anything that you put on a pay-per-view per se. Everybody worked hard. I never thought I'd say this, but the last couple of months I've really felt like Ric Flair should really step back from the ring because it really feels like he's taking away from his, like, until 2 or 3 years ago, I would say, listen, he's one of the best guys on any card still, but he's really relying on those old gimmicks more and more as time goes on. And Chris Benoit now from main event to opener. What's your call?
Everybody mentioned the exact thing. I watched this with about 8 people at this house, and they all said the same thing. Wow, Chris Benoit went for the main event to the opener.
Really?
And I guess it could be worse. He could have been second match on the card. At least the opener is kind of the match where you're supposed to set the pace for the show.
Yeah.
And if you want a good match, you put some guys in the opener or whatever. But still, that's just proof right there that they have absolutely no direction with the guy that was just the world champion. I disagree with Flair. Flair is so entertaining, even when he does the exact same stuff every time, that I really have absolutely no problem with it. When I look at the entire pay-per-view as a whole and what everybody that was in the room with me reacted to, I mean, Flair was like the talk of the evening. And, if you can get a whole room of guys talking about you when they don't care about the rest of the show, that's saying something. So
the problem is, though, is that in the long-term context of things, I mean, we've talked before about hot shot angles. One night they get a great reaction, but in the long run they don't really work. I watched Flair wrestle on Raw last week, and I don't know if he was tired or blown up or what it was, but he wasn't even selling punches, and he was so slow to get to his feet. And, far be it for me to be critical of someone who is today a far better wrestler than I will ever be. But just as a fan, I can't help but feel, I mean, Batista they're trying to get over as a killer. Chris Benoit is obviously one of the very top talents in North America. William Regal is a very talented man, if not a WWE-style worker. I like watching Flair. I do find him entertaining, but I do think that he's counterproductive to a serious program when it comes to in-ring in that style. It feels like he's relying on that stuff so much that it can actually take away from if he's involved in a more serious element.
Well, I think the thing with Flair is they use him wrong. I mean, he shouldn't be on TV every single Monday night.
Right, absolutely.
And I think that he is a valuable part of the company, and I would rather see him once a month on pay-per-view than never see him at all. And the other thing is, like, they beat him so much that it means nothing to beat him now.
Yeah.
And that's the other problem. So there are problems with how he's used, but at the same time, I would hate to never see Ric Flair wrestle on WWE again. So I prefer a balance, but you know, if I have to see him every single week as opposed to never see him again, then I'll just see him every single week.
Trish took on Victoria for the Women's Championship. What I define as just a match. I liked them both very much. Didn't think this match was anything particular. And then Steven Richards took on Tyson Tomko, which was perturbing on a number of levels. It's always nice when they give you an added unadvertised bonus. And this was unadvertised, but it wasn't a bonus. What's your impression of those two matches, and why did Richards get beaten up by Tyson Tomko, who the crowd has never cared about, and for some reason they gave him 8 minutes?
The Trish thing was, like you said, just a match, basically. It's a little better than your usual women's match, but I was just wondering where the 8 months of angles were with Christian and Trish breaking up, because all of a sudden, he called her slut, and I'm like, well, where'd that come from?
Yeah,
Didn't you guys just love each other? So that was stupid.
Yeah.
And then Stevie Richards thing, I don't know what anybody in the back was thinking when that was put together and given 8 minutes. But that was one of the worst things I've ever seen on pay-per-view. You know, I don't know if, like, the people were chanting Stevie the last few weeks when the person in drag came out, and Vince just thought, wow, if Tyson beats on this man, the heat will be out of this world, or what they were thinking, but that was so horrible, and I think that actually killed a lot of the show for the fans, and was a reason why they didn't care about a lot of the stuff that came next.
I think it's an example of, you know, when you talk to old school guys like Jim Cornette and that, and they'll say, you know, back in the day we used to do it more on the fly, by the feel, and we didn't plan everything out in advance. I mean, one would think that if they were feeling out through this match, they would have told him to go home 45 seconds in when they realized the crowd definitely wasn't buying it. And the fact that they went so long is surprising. And I think it did cause problems heat-wise through the rest of the show. Whose cornflakes did Steven Richards urinate in for the last 3 years?
And I want to know why they built up Steven Richards for God knows how many months.
It was the most consistent thing in 3 months, yeah. For 3 months, it's the most consistent thing is he's the woman in drag.
Yeah, and then he comes on in his debut, he gets beat up and pinned.
Next, we have Chris Jericho versus Christian in a ladder match for the IC title. Again, it's not that I question the wrestlers or the match or anything, but you got Chris Jericho, who's one of the best, most consistent guys on the Raw brand. You can put him in pretty much any situation, babyface or heel, good guy, bad guy, and he can pull something together. His charisma will lend to any situation. Then you've got Christian, who's coming back off a back injury from a cage match, and the first match back you put him in is a ladder match. They gave it six days worth of promotion, booked it completely on the fly, so I can't imagine people really buying into a big feud because it didn't come across as a big feud. And the match itself, for me, I respect both guys a great deal, but I didn't get the sense of a match. I got the sense of a stunt show, and after Steven Richards and Tyson Tomko, I don't think it really came off. What's your impression of the whole booking going in and where they're going now with Jericho's champ?
I think the booking was stupid. I think it was some fluke thing because Edge got hurt. They just, decided to do this at the last minute because the pay-per-view was dying. And even the booking of it was stupid in the fact that Trish went like 4 months with a broken hand and didn't have to forfeit her belt. And Edge hurts himself and they make him forfeit the belt the next day or whatever. And as far as the match, I actually didn't like how it was worked at all. Because I think that in 2004, if you're going to do a ladder match, you've either got to go all out and risk your life, which I'm not a big fan of, or you need to have one big bump.
Yeah.
Because if you have more than one, people start thinking that you're going to go all out and risk your life. And then when you don't, they're disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that that's what they did. I was watching it thinking, you know what? They're building up to one big bump, and the place is going to go crazy, and then they'll do the finish. And they did build up to one big bump, and the place did go crazy, and then they kept going. And it got to the point where it felt like it was dragging, and then Jericho just went up and got the belt, and I thought, wow, that was not the best ladder match I've ever seen.
Yeah. Again, a good work ethic, but just wrong place, wrong time, timing-wise. And it really looked to me like Christian wasn't 100%. Any big bump he took was face first, and he didn't really seem to want to take back bumps, which is understandable. And next we had La Resistance versus Rhino and Tajiri. I'm not sure there's a whole lot to be said about that apart from, again, I'm not sure where these guys have been feuding for like 2 months, and I have yet to figure out exactly where they're trying to go with it or what
or why
show
anyone
was.
should care.
Yeah, why are we going to pay money to see this match? What exactly is the crux here? Then we move on to the double main events, let's say. Shawn Michaels versus Kane. It was good to see Shawn back. It wasn't as good a match as I expected, which is probably a little bit unfair, just because we've seen Shawn Michaels have so many amazing matches. And of course, when you think of Shawn Michaels versus Kane, you sort of have to think a bit of Shawn Michaels' amazing matches with The Undertaker, where basically he'd kill himself for 20 minutes, and then they'd go to the finish, and that was it. What do you make of the match?
The thing also, when you think of Undertaker-Shawn matches, is Shawn was a heel, so it was a totally different dynamic.
Of course.
And with this one here, I think it was pretty much exactly like I expected, because Kane has had some bad matches with some great guys, including he had a bad match with Chris Benoit a few years ago.
Really?
And the only two people I can remember having a bad match with Benoit were Billy Gunn and Kane. And Kane redeemed himself, and Billy Gunn has not. So he's in a league of his own right there. But he's a weird guy to have to work with, I guess. And Shawn did as good a job as possible with him in this match. So I thought it was good. Probably the best match on the show.
The storyline, this is part of what bugs me about the Lita Kane storyline, is that it's more than just the story itself, which is weird and doesn't make sense in any frame of reference. You have Shawn Michaels, the born-again Christian, make his big comeback, pin Kane, not injure him or anything, pin Kane, shakes Lita by the hand, gives her a kiss, and say, okay, away you go to be now beaten. And, we're led to believe basically she's taken home and beaten and essentially raped. I mean, I don't like to say this, but I mean, the way they've written the storyline, she was forced to have sex with the man. And here's born-again Christian Shawn Michaels, have yourself a good night, Lita. Off I go to dance to the crowd with the music, while Kane turns around and drags her backstage. This whole storyline is driving my head in nuts. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel, or is it really going on for the 8 months? And I've asked you this time and again, and I'm going to keep doing it.
It's going the distance. She's going to have a child. And I try not to think about this as much as you just did, because I'd go crazy.
It's very hard, but just seeing Shawn Michaels there and the cross and, by Lita, it's just not right,
It's bad enough having to watch him come back at the convention and try and, figure that one out in my mind.
Yeah. And we move on to the main event, Randy Orton versus Triple H. You could see by the look on Orton's face, he knew that he wasn't meant to be there. It wasn't his time to be a babyface. The fans weren't ready for it. He wasn't feeling it. The music wasn't right. He didn't have the right persona. It just hadn't developed. I mean, they compared to The Rock a couple of years ago, and Randy Orton is very talented, but the timing this time was not right. What do you think about the match, and what do you think about the story going in and Hunter taking the title away?
I really think that this was like the biggest booking debacle since the Invasion. As far as 1 month ago, they had so much going for them with this program, what they could have done. And this was supposed to be WrestleMania. Instead, it was a lackluster match at the September pay-per-view that everybody's going to forget by next month. And I just sat there in awe watching it. Like, what they could have done and what they ended up doing is just... It's almost like the Angle, Hunter, Steph love triangle, where they had so much they could have done, and they killed it, just like they killed this thing right here. So, the Orton push is not working. He should never have won the belt. He should have never gone babyface. He should have never split from Evolution. I could go on and on. But they did all that, and now it's over, and, Yeah, what do you do now? He chases Hunter till WrestleMania so they can have another match that everyone already saw that wasn't any good.
Now, we haven't seen Raw yet. We're doing this particular segment right before Raw, so most of you guys watching will have seen it. But nonetheless, what do you expect they're going to do with Orton? Now, are they going to go down that road? Because I don't see any other match for Mania, but they've really kind of killed it, and I'm not sure where they're going to go now.
I want to know if they do plan on doing it for Mania, how are they going to stretch this out for 7 more months without them getting in the ring together? They've just ruined this one. I have no earthly idea how they could salvage this. I mean, obviously he'll be a babyface and he'll chase after them, but what does that mean? He has to go through Batista for 2 months and then Flair for 2 months and then Hunter? Woo! They already screwed it up, so what does it matter?
Well, we continue to go forward with optimism and high hopes for the future professional wrestling.
That's right. It sucks.
In a couple of weeks, you're going to have No Mercy, so win, lose, or draw, we're going to have some fun with that one, too. Brian will be back here this time next week for your objective, if time to time pessimistic view on the world of professional wrestling. Thank you very much, Brian. WrestlingObserver.com. You have yourself a good week, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
Take care. Okay, move of the week time, and I believe we've gone to one other time. Hayabusa is one of the craziest guys in his business, and that has cost him. I don't know if I told you this story the last time, but I saw him at the E3 Video Games Convention in 2000 in Los Angeles, and he was doing his high-flying wrestling there, and there's like 3 or 4 fans walking around. It wasn't that big. Okay, maybe 15, 20, something like that. And the guy was still doing Firebird splashes and reverse moonsaults and Asai moonsaults and all that. So he is a great risk taker, and if you're in a big arena and if you're facing Jushin Thunder Liger, you're going to want to jump headfirst over that top rope and damn the consequences. This is our move of the week from Hayabusa.
おっとはやぶさが仕掛けたはやぶさが仕掛けますさあローリングソットそして今ゴンが鳴っていきなり空中戦
It is supercar time, ladies and gentlemen. IWA Mid-South. It is my kind of show. It's a shot of Southern comfort. This is a really good show. They got a lot of great stars in here. It's very recent as well. It's only a couple of weeks old. We got Chris Hero, who is a big indie favorite. A lot of people have seen him wrestle. Got a very technical style. Knows an incredible array of reversals and moves. He takes on Samoa Joe, one of the top grapplers in the U.S. today, Ring of Honor champion. We've got a big tournament. It's going to be like a 7-man tournament, and the winner of this is going to be one big schmoz of a match. The winner of that takes on B.J. Whitmire. We got Petey Williams in there from Team Canada, Alex Shelley from Ring of Honor, much more. Then there's a tag team tournament. CM Punk teams up with Colt Cabana, who's actually in this part of the world right now. He's touring for All Star Wrestling. We hope to get him over here. Homicide is on there. He teams up with B-Boy. And Tracy Smothers and Chris Hamrick, who we haven't heard as much from since ECW folded a couple of years ago. They're in that tournament. This is your preview for IWA Mid-South, a shot of Southern comfort. And also in there, Jerry Lynn versus Sabu. Check this one out. It's a Sunday, 8 p.m. right here on the Wrestling Channel, your Supercard of the Week. Okay, on the line we have now from Germany. We've gone east. Normally we go west to the U.S. This time we're going east over to Germany. On the line we have the Slam Wrestling Hall of Famer Joe E. Legend. You'll know him from his runs in WWE, NWA TNA, and just about every damn country on the face of the planet. Last weekend, or the week before last, in fact, he wrestled back-to-back matches with Doug Williams for the FWA over in England. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How's everything going over there?
We are doing great. Now, how were the shows with Doug, the FWA, last weekend? How'd you enjoy that?
I was really, really impressed. I've been working mostly for All-Star Wrestling in England.
Brian Dixon's crowd?
Yeah, for a couple of years, and then Org Williams and a few others. And I enjoy the style, of course. But FWA, they're really kind of cultivating to a newer audience, whereas Brian's maintaining his audience.
Right.
I have nothing against what Brian's doing. I think Brian knows what he's doing, and he knows what he wants to achieve. And FWA is making great strides to achieve something a little bit different, which I really like.
What's the difference for you in terms of, because I know your name is actually quite synonymous with All-Star, I've done a lot of work with them. For you, what's the difference between working with the two promotions when you go to work? What are the differences?
Well, Brian's a little more traditional. Brian's a little more traditional in he likes having the kids there. He likes gearing the thing more towards the kids, and that you can see that in the product. There's a little more showing out. There's a little more playing with the kids in the crowd. FWA is more for the hardcore fan, not necessarily chairs and ill-tempered piranhas and buckets to dunk people in, but just it's more for the hardcore fan who really knows their holds, knows knows the history of the business, and has some idea of what the future is. People who buy the tapes. I mean, if you go to FWA show, you see guys selling tapes from all over the world in the front lobby. So I think at FWA, their style is more for fans who are really, on the internet every day checking things out. Just more, I guess, a more knowledgeable fan, whereas Brian's is more for the passing fan.
You've wrestled extensively in this part of the world, in Western Europe, and you've also wrestled extensively outside it. Can you tell us some of the various exotic countries that you have performed in over the last few years?
Let's see here. Okay, Canada, the States, England, Ireland, Scotland, Switzerland, Wales, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Austria, Japan.
Wow.
Shoot, there's a few more. Puerto Rico.
When you started off in the business, did you intend to wind up being this global traveler? Because really your name, most people are associated with one given promotion or one given region, whereas you've had great success. You've worked, we'll talk about NWA, TNA shortly, also worked for WWE, but you've been all over the world. Is that something you take pride in, or is it something that just happened to happen?
A little from column A, a little from column B. I like the idea of the security. When I got my first deal with WWF at the time, to me that was just like, wow, stability. I don't have to be on the phone all the time, hustling for work and calling friends and calling in favors and stuff like that. I mean, it was nice to just know, okay, I'm just going to get my schedule every week and I just go, and the money was great.
Yeah.
But truthfully, I love the world travel. I was always hoping to be able to see a lot of the world, and actually I just got confirmed today I'm going to Nigeria very shortly at the beginning of October. I've not been there before. I've been in South Africa, but never there. And it's just another new place to see. I was in Switzerland yesterday.
Really?
And I'm going back in 3 weeks. They're having a huge show called On Fire 4, and they're bringing in Jeff Jarrett and I forget who. Dallas Page is coming in.
All right.
And they're doing, this is going to be their WrestleMania. So I mean, I'm happy to be part of big shows for smaller companies, and I like being able to go around and do my thing. I like the fact that for what I'm doing, I prefer to go out there and be myself as opposed to going to WWE and they take you and they make you, like Just Joe, which was the most garbage gimmick ever in the company, or TNA, where they start me off as a wrestler in a main program with Jeff, cut the legs out from under me, and turn me into a security guard.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about global travel, of course, it sounds easy, but between language barriers and going to different countries where there's different products available, different gyms, what's the biggest challenge for you in being on the road? Is it nutrition? Is it green cards and visas? What is it?
No, for the most part, the companies handle the visas. I know Russia was one of the hardest, just the consulate. I mean, people were just rude. I wish I could be more nice about it, but they're just rude. I mean, even when I was there,
really,
the majority of the people, until they found out you were a wrestler or or at least until they found out I was Canadian and not American. Just rude.
Really?
And the food there, I mean, first I loved going to Russia. I'm supposed to be going back in November, and I'm excited because I love the history. I love, the being a tourist. And the crowd was great at the wrestling show. The company treated us well. But I'm going to bring more protein shakes and protein bars this time because the food just did not agree with me.
Right,
so nutrition is a big problem. Like going to England, it's just so much fried stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you live there, you're used to it. It's not a big deal. But if you're not used to it, it can really get to you,
And now other guests, actually, we had Gangrel on last week, who was talking. He's a wonderful guy, and hopefully hasn't been blown away in Florida yet. But
oh God.
It's pretty tough over there here, but he was talking a bit about how in the U.S., because wrestling is so overexposed over there, fans' expectations are not only extremely high, but at times they're unreasonable towards the hardcore would-be. That's a bit of an editorial comment, but most guys I've talked to find it true. I find it true. Do you find it at all easier to perform in other countries? Are the fans more appreciative of wrestling and more willing to go along with what you're doing than when you're working in the U.S.?
Every territory is different. I mean, like with Russia, I would lock up with a guy, grab a headlock, and say, ooh. And the guy takes my arm and, like they were acting like I just did the most graceful, high-flying move ever.
Mm-hmm.
I think part and parcel of the problem in the States is, and this isn't to take the mickey out of guys in the X division, and if it's TNA or cruiserweights otherwise, but they've kind of raised the bar as far as how much they'll kill themselves. A lot of guys go out there and do things like, try to take these Mick Foley bumps in order to draw attention to themselves because they don't have a good body and they're always wearing T-shirts and jeans, or because they can't work. I mean, truth be told, it can't be that bad because you've got a guy like The Rock. The Rock worked hard. There's no question. I'm a huge fan of his work.
Mm-hmm.
He worked hard, but he worked smart. He's a guy who, at 50, 60 years old, he's going to be able to run in a park with his grandkids and not be in abject agony.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, guys like, like Jeff Hardy, I mean, God bless the guy. I love him. He's a great guy. But he's cultivated his audience in such a way that if he were just to go out there and wrestle a match, they sit on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
He has to go up there and do crazy dives because that's what people have ultimately paid to see from Jeff Hardy.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's key for most guys, it's not so much the industry making them do it, it's these guys making themselves, marketing themselves as suicidal. And once you're marketed as suicidal, that's what you have to deliver if you expect to get paid.
Do you think WWE is regretting that in the late 90s they really fostered this, the whole ECW style that came along in the ladder matches, and they sort of jumped on that bandwagon, and now it's really kind of a situation where we had a ladder match just a couple of days ago at the pay-per-view and all that, and it doesn't seem to mean that much anymore, but it is a lot harder to sell a legit wrestling match than it was about 10 years ago. Do you think WWE regrets ever going down that line and desensitizing fans to more traditional wrestling, real wrestling, unquote, the style that you do, Triple H does, Chris Benoit does?
Not necessarily, because, I mean, for everything they did with the TLC matches and stuff, they also took the hardcore division and turned it into a complete joke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that whole division, in my opinion, was developed to go out of the way to make sure people thought of hardcore wrestling as simply something to laugh at.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why you had the 24/7 rule, which is why Crash Holly, God rest his soul, always did kind of comedy sketches and would lose his belt 6 times in a show and keep winning it back by the end of the day running away.
So do you think it was WWE's way of basically just
Phasing
belittling
out
that style and making sure it doesn't catch on? That's an interesting thought. I've never heard that interpretation of it.
No, I think that's what they did, and I think that, but then you had guys like, Edge and Christian, who were 2 very good friends of mine, going out there and they have such unbelievable matches, like those TLC matches.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings fans back to it. If anything, WWE, I guess, maybe puts too many of those matches on a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what might dilute it in the fans' eyes. If they were to have one TLC match a year and it was an annual event, it would be spectacular. Just like they do. I think they only do the Cell once a year, right?
It's in and around once a year. Yeah, they keep it at that.
Yeah, keep it as special, and the matches will seem special.
Mm-hmm.
Do it all the time, and they become commonplace, and then you've got to go that much farther to shock people.
Right. You worked for Andrew McManus, did you?
Yes.
WWA. What were your thoughts on that promotion? Because at the time, there was a lot of waves simply because he brought in so many big names and put out so much money to bring in Sting, Bret Hart, Scott Steiner, these kind of guys. What was your impression of him as a promoter, and did you ever feel that was going to be a launching point?
I was really hoping it would. They treated us fantastically. The only problem with it is that Andrew McManus is a rock promoter. And I guess my biggest gripe with Andrew is that he booked that Kiss and Symphony concert from Melbourne,
right,
and didn't invite me. That upsets me so much. Andrew treated us really well. He was a wrestling fan more than he was a wrestling businessman, which I think is why he brought in so many names. He just wanted to be around all these guys we'd watched and admired on TV for so long. But he really didn't know, I don't think, what he wanted to get booked out of it.
Right.
He wanted to make sure Sting performed because he thinks, well, in my mind, if I saw his name on a card, I'd pay.
Right.
If I saw this name, if I saw that name. I'm not sure he knew what he wanted to follow up with. I was hoping it would launch into something, especially when he did several pay-per-views. I would have expected him to bottom out after the first one. If the first one didn't draw, okay, it's back, where's Kiss playing? I was hoping it would go further. It gave me the opportunity to really sit down and talk to Bret Hart at length, which I'd always wanted to do. And it was well worth it, even if I didn't get paid, which I did. It would have been worth it just to have that time to hang out with Bret Hart and just let him talk my ear off. Absorbed every word out of the guy's mouth. I just wish that I wish it would have been another option.
You were, when you started out early in your career, you worked with a lot of guys who made it. Edge, Christian, you already mentioned. I believe you worked with Rhino fairly early in your career as well, did you?
Yeah. We used to go down to Detroit, which is about 4 hours drive from Toronto.
Right.
And Ryan was working out of there constantly. I was there when he got his name. He used to be known as what the heck was his name? Terry Richards. That's what they were calling him. And we were just in the locker room one day, and D'Lo was there. And he said, "You know what? You're too big to be just a Terry Richards. Terry Richards, he sells pizza. You need a name. If you look like a Rhino, you're a big beast. You're a strong guy. You got a good look. You should be a Rhino." And he went with Rhino Richards, and next thing you know, ECW signs him, takes off the Richards part so he won't be associated with Stevie Richards.
Right.
And, away they go. Rhino's the guy who got me booked in Europe the first time for Otto Vance in '98.
Well, that's very cool.
Well, it's very cool because that's where I met my wife. So.
Well, that's very, very helpful.
Yes.
What do you think, from your experience then, is having seen guys like Edge and Christian and Rhino very early in their careers, what is it that makes those guys that are currently earning a good paycheck in WWE against other guys that you've been around that have been wrestling 10 or 15 years that have yet to get that kind of living? And most people in this business never will. Fans seem to take for granted when you get a good slot or good work or work for a good promotion, but there's so many people out there and it's so hard. What is it that these guys had that other people out there don't right now?
I think each guy brings his own thing to the table. With Rhino, I think when you watch him, there isn't a guy on Raw or SmackDown who works with more intensity. He looks like he's out there to mangle somebody. And he's got a mean look about, even though he's the most kind-hearted guy you ever met. You should see him with his daughter. I mean, the guy is a teddy bear. But he looks like a killer. There's something about Edge, as they call it, an X factor. If I'm sitting in a room with my back to the door and he walks in the room, you almost have to go, who the heck just came in? And turn around to see who it is.
Right.
He just has a star quality about him. Christian, I think, is one of the top 3 workers in the company, if not in the world. I think he's tremendous. Really? And he's been shortchanged a lot. He's a guy who works hard. He diets hard. He diets a lot harder than me, I'll tell you that. He has a passion for the industry. He's got a great mind for everything that he wants to accomplish. He could go out there with a chair. He's kind of like, in a way, like Flair, where he could go out there, with a pencil and do 25 minutes and have the crowd on their feet. I think Christian has probably the strongest work ethic I've ever seen. And I think that's ultimately, finally, won him over with The Office.
Okay, let me stop you there, Joe. It's just coming up on 10 to the hour, 10 to 9. We're going to take a quick commercial break and come back with the Q&A and the competition. So you have yourself a great week. We're going to come back with you next week, talk about NWA TNA, some great dirt from WWE and more. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.
Now we're going to get in on a little competition TWC has been doing the last couple of weeks. In fact, it's more than a little competition. It's a great competition. You see, WWE is coming over this side of the pond. They're going to do Raw, SmackDown, have a whole lot of house shows from both Raw and the SmackDown side of the locker rooms. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to give away a pair of tickets to every show, including ringside at Cardiff. So if you want to be in for a chance to win this great prize, you got to answer this very simple question. Eddie Guerrero, former WWE champion, is also known as A, Latino Heat, B, Latino Mullet, or C, the Gringo Warrior. You can text your answer WWE A, WWE B, or WWE C to 88066. And make sure you don't say Blake, because this is a bigger competition this week. So it's WWE A, B, or C, depending on your answer, and it's $150 per text, and you've got until Thursday at midnight to get your answers in. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's once again time for Q&A. The information is in the screen in front of you right now, and remember, you can ask a question on any topic, because if we don't like it, we'll just ignore you. The first question comes from Anthony in Hethfield, who asks, Dear Blake, first of all, I love watching the Bagpipe Report. Well, thank you very much. I want to ask you, what do you think of WWE's approach to getting lots of new characters who don't go anywhere? Kenzu Suzuki came along, and then as soon as he is introduced, then he's going to debut the trailers for Mordecai. Then we've got Heidenreich. Then we have the Caribbean Cool. This is all talking about SmackDown, of course, and now Mordecai isn't showing up for a couple of weeks on SmackDown. Well, the short answer is, and we've touched on this in recent weeks, and again, it's possibly worded slightly negatively, but right now they're looking for the next big character. We talked recently about how they're looking for the next Hulk Hogan, which is why they tend to hire bigger guys, and they like the idea of a bigger guy getting over, because in wrestling people feel that's more marketable, which may be the case. What they're doing right now basically is people are scratching their heads looking for something to catch on, because a lot of the characters right now aren't all that over. A couple of years ago, a lot more wrestlers on the roster were popular with the fans. So right now they're testing out a lot of different ideas, and whether your thoughts on them are positive or negative, they're trying to throw out a lot of characters right there and just see what sticks and see what doesn't. And whatever doesn't stick, like Mordecai, isn't going to be around for too long. Daniel would like to know if Nathan Jones is coming back to WWE and what he is up to right now. Well, the honest truth is I have no idea what he's up to right now, but I don't see him coming back to WWE really or any other wrestling organization on a long-term basis. Nathan Jones was with WWE about a year, and he didn't get on too well. People weren't too happy with his performance. He really didn't seem to fit in the ring, and he never became comfortable with being a wrestler. First time he got the chance when they went to Australia to tour, Nathan took his bags and he went home. Most people had expected that for a long time, and because of that, I don't think we'll be seeing Nathan Jones again anytime soon. It is that time of the week again where we take a look at what's going to happen soon in the UK and Ireland. Revolution British Wrestling, Saturday 16th of October, invades Selbyk Hall in London. United Kingdom Pro Wrestling happens Thursday, October 7th in Hackney, London. World Association of Wrestling takes place Saturday, October 2nd at the Community Centre in Faulkenham. Then on Friday, October 8th, they got another show in Canvey, Ireland. NWA Ireland takes place Saturday, September 25th. They're going to be in Kildare Town. And then Sunday, September 26th, they're going to be in Bray, County Wicklow, where they will crown the first ever NWA Irish champion. Now, dudes, let's check out what's happening right here on TWC in the next 7 days. First, it's NWA TNA. We visit the America's X Cup as we've got Team UK going over to America to take on Team AAA from Mexico. We've got the full teams colliding in a 4-on-4 battle. We got Frankie Sloan versus Hector Garza, James Mason versus Abismo Negro, and a whole lot more, so make sure you check that out. On to CZW Fake UTV. Roderick Strong takes on the Vicious Homicide, and then Bobby Quance takes on the high-flying Sanjay Dutt. Todd Sexton goes one-on-one with Skeeter Frost this week on NWA Wildside. Then it's a tag team match with Onyx and Adam Jacobs taking on Jason Cross and Michael Adrian. In 3PW, Damian Adams takes on Ruckus, and then we take it to the extreme as Raven goes one-on-one with the hardcore icon, the Sandman. We got all of that and a whole lot more coming up over the next 7 days, so make sure you stay tuned to TWC. Also, this coming Monday night, it's part 2 of the shoot interview with one of the all-time legends, Brutus the Barber Beefcake. as he takes us back to the 80s WWF, 90s WCW, and beyond. Make sure to check out the WrestlingChannel.tv for further information. We got a whole lot more shows we mentioned there coming up this next week. Original programming from all over the world, including Japan. And check out the BagpipeReport.com. You can see my smarmy face and this whole episode right there online. You can save it. You can watch it as many times as you want. You can even send it to the police. You guys have yourself a great week. We'll see you this same time, same channel, right here on the Bagpipe Report next week. All the news, all the information, and much, much more. Have a great weekend, guys.